Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Global Missions Podcast. My name is Mags, and I'll be your host for today's episode. We're going to be talking today with Heather Trumpfheller, who is the heart behind Global Switchboard. It's a digital platform that helps bring together the talents of people who are at home, senders, together with the needs that are on the mission field. And they're leveraging technology in a wonderful way. We're now familiar with a platform called Uber. Years ago, it was maybe a little bit hard to imagine getting into a stranger's vehicle. Well, technology has been used to make that safe and convenient for us. Airbnb would be another example where we have a model that we understand using technology that opens new doors of possibility. That's where Switchboard fits in. And I'm really looking forward to sharing this episode with you. We've entitled it Practical and Professional Help from the Home Front. Our guest for today's episode is Heather Trumpfheller, who is a technology leader and a community builder based in Austin, Texas. She is passionate about helping forge meaningful relationships using technology to create lasting impact. She currently serves as the Chief Growth Officer at Switchboard, which is a not-for-profit tech startup focusing on mobilizing mission teams and connecting talent to needs. She's a lifelong learner and an adventurer. She can usually be found with a good book, exploring new places, or soaking up the sun outdoors. Heather, welcome to the Global Missions Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Looking forward to our discussion today. There's some great creativity and innovation going on through this organization. Just before we get to the organization, Heather, just give us a brief word about yourself and how did you get passionate about global missions?
So you'll learn about Switchboard, but Switchboard is essentially what I wish I would have had when I was in the marketplace. So quick background on me. I grew up in a Christian household in Texas, but we weren't a missions family. I didn't really know anyone who went on a mission trip, honestly, other than some of my friends whose parents were like, go on this short-term mission trip to be more grateful. So I really didn't have this proper view, I would say, of missions. So I always looked at the Great Commission as this thing you outsource to the church, to the ministries, to the elite Christians who went into missions, right? Like, I studied broadcast journalism. I worked in public relations. I went into tech consulting. I was always in the marketplace. So I thought my role in missions was tithing to the church and praying, and then they would do that for me. But God kept telling me, let's reimagine this, right? So Switchboard is here to help more believers take that ownership and realize they play that role too in God's global story. And that's very much been my story, that I too play a role.
That's very good. Well, that's a nice segue to the organization, a little bit about you. But now we have this organization called Switchboard. Some of our audience may never heard of it before. So what's the quick version, the elevator presentation, and then we'll go deeper afterwards.
So it's a virtual and free platform for connection between missionaries, church plants, Christian nonprofits, and believers who want to use their skills personally and professionally, right? So it's a virtual volunteer platform so that people can serve with their skills and their schedules, right? Missions is not something you flip on or off when you jump on a plane. So it's a virtual platform for connection between the missionaries and believers to bridge the gap across skill sets.
That's a tremendous idea. So we get the basic idea here. We've got mission taking place in some context. We have the capacity of talent and experience and enthusiasm in another place. And Switchboard is helping to build a link into the middle.
Yeah, exactly.
So where did the idea come from? We've got some hints here already, but how did you come to build this?
So apparently a lot of sending organizations have tried something like this, right? For former missionaries who have learned a language, learned about a people group, and then need to go back to Florida to take care of an aging parent, right? And they want to be able to stay engaged. So I've heard from people like a Steve Richardson at Pioneers that they've tried similar things. But I really think this needed to come from someone from the tech world, right? And so the pandemic really showed us how much could be done virtually in your work capacity. Why could that not be the same from a volunteer capacity? So our executive director named Scott, He went through the Colson Fellows discipleship program, and they ask you at the end to do a 3-year ministry plan. And he had heard from these people from like the Pioneers, the Christar, the Missio Nexuses, that they wanted to do something like this. And he essentially said, okay, I think if we make this a tech platform with the focus of your skills, your schedule, right? Something you can do from home, doesn't need to be this big thing. Maybe it'll help people reframe, right? That the missions and the Great Commission are for the masses. So really a little bit out of conversations with different leaders already in the missions industry, a couple people from the Colson Fellows program, and really a lot of the pandemic and just seeing the way that the world was evolving.
It's nice to know that there's some more beautiful fruit that came out of a challenging time, the pandemic. But you mentioned that, the use of technology has been just rethought for ministry, and glad that it's applied here. So we sort of have a picture of the ministry side of things. We think of church planters or folks doing discipleship, evangelism, perhaps business as mission. There's this other body of talent that we want to learn more about today. How do you refer to those folks? Do you have a typical term that are for those folks who are willing to offer some of that talent?
Yes. So we call them kingdom consultants. And really, when you make a profile, you come in as a volunteer and you tell us, a little bit about your bandwidth. You tell us, what are you passionate about, right? Are you really wanting to serve workplace ministry or student ministry, Bible literacy, refugees, anti-trafficking, women and children? Were you called to serve the Middle East or creative access? Or do you have a personal connection to South America? Are you wanting to serve with a missionary or church plant in that region? So we want to know that. And then we want to know your personal and professional skills, right? If you're a CPA who can help a nonprofit with their taxes or a church with the budget process, but maybe you're also parenting a child with special needs, or you speak French, and those are great skills that we'd want to know. So yes, for our kingdom consultants, we want to know more about how they want to serve, what they're passionate about, and if there's any regions of missions that they really want to make an impact.
Sure. It's like a personal profile of the individual makeup of someone who's curious, right? I'm assuming someone could start from curiosity. Is that right? You want to encourage people to explore, probably.
Absolutely. I often tell people everyone just needs a sounding board, right? So many people become the barrier of why they don't serve. I don't have the skills. My skills aren't big enough, right? Or they wouldn't do enough good, or we're the ones really preventing ourselves and adding the barriers. Time flexibility, I don't know where to get started, things like that, right? So we want to remove those barriers. But also for the missionaries and the nonprofit leaders, they're often the Jills and the Jacks of all trades, right? They're having to wear all of these hats. They're not keeping up to date on tech trends or marketing, social media, because God called them to learn a language, love on a people group, whatever it might be. So we don't need to give all of the burden and load to them. So it's really just building out this more equal weight, right? How can you combine your skills that you've learned with your experience come together to advance the gospel?
It's an extension of the body mentality, right? Like, it's just, where are the gifts and skills and how do we connect them well? And with these tech tools, geography is not quite the barrier it used to be. So there's that interest and kind of a profile in the of a kingdom consultant. Let me just look through the lens of somebody who might be considering this and wondering, well, what kind of checking do you do, Switchboard? Vetting is a strong term, but maybe it fits. How do you go about exploring the readiness of these folks to contribute to Christian ministry?
Absolutely. So vetting of the kingdom consultants, first off, we ask them, a little bit about yourself, right? Why do you want to serve? More of that heart posture. 2, we do ask everyone to tell us where they go to church. That's a little bit because we also send these missions pastors a report of, here's who's serving from your congregation. So it's an amazing mission story for these churches so that they can actually see the impact that their people are having, but also just to vet further, where are you going to church? What does your routine look like within that? But then we're less having them, like they're not uploading a resume, right? Because also when you say the word, oh, I'm an expert, there's varying levels of that, right? What I think I'm an expert in, someone else might, be harder on themselves and not think that they're an expert in. So we're less vetting the specific skill set, but more of that heart posture. There's a declaration of faith. And the main rule on our platform on both parties is we're entirely free. So if you're willing to volunteer your skills as a website developer, you can't send an invoice to that missionary at the end of this, right? So it's also just acknowledging that you understand that this is Great Commission focused volunteerism.
Oh, I appreciate that tone of generosity too, right? But it's clear that this doesn't involve an invoice. I hope that's encouraging too to our mission workers. We call them goers often, Heather, on this program, to the goers who are maybe hearing this, that there could be some talent and resourcing to come alongside whatever you're doing that you need to get done, but you're not great at it. Like Heather just said, you weren't trained to do that. And there are some people willing to help, and here's a way you could learn about them.
And then vetting of the Great Commission organizations, right? So that's what we call the church plants, the nonprofits, the goers. So for that, you have to have a Great Commission bottom line, right? This should also be encouraging, right? This isn't just any old nonprofit can be on here, right? This needs to be a Great Commission bottom line. And that being said, you might be a business as mission in a closed country. We want to make sure you feel safe on the platform. So we encourage people use pseudonyms, VPNs, things like that. But we will vet all of the organizations as well. Kind of similar how when we don't ask for a resume from the Kingdom Consultants. It's more of the heart posture. It's the same thing from the organizations. We'll review you. We might have a conversation, check out your website. If you have any information there, right? Just reviewing to see what's available to make sure that it's a win-win for both parties. But what we just ask of the goers or the Great Commission organizations on the platform is have access to reliable technology, because at the end of the day, we are a desktop browser platform. So you need to have access to technology. While we have people in hundreds of countries, we want to be able to ideally communicate promptly and as well in conversational English, because majority of our volunteers are speaking English. And I understand that there are translation tools, but sometimes there is a little bit of a barrier there. So ideally to be able to do some conversational English. And then again, same thing. The Kingdom Consultant's not going to send you an invoice. Also, please do not use our platform for fundraising. We can connect you with an expert in fundraising, but you cannot ask a volunteer at the end of a call for funds, right? So truly, again, that heart posture of creating that generous generation.
And I agree with you. This is a two-way trust that you're building. Anyone who is interested in offering their skill sets to this, this is a place where you can find a reasonable confidence of a heart alignment with an organization that has a valid purpose to advance the kingdom of God. And then you can step forward into that with the confidence that you're with your people that you're looking for, and that foundational checkout has been done.
And just to visualize it further too, so our Kingdom Consultants browse through open serving opportunities by skill sets, causes, and regions, and then they can read bios about the goer, or they can read bios about the nonprofit. And then our goers, our church plants that are on the platform, they post by their gaps. So they don't browse through volunteers' profiles. They tell us, hey, I need help with a marketing strategy. Here's what I'm looking for. And then we match on the back end, right? So it's more of that side versus the goers browsing through volunteers' profiles. So just wanted to also share that.
Yeah, it's really good. It helps us get the picture, and our audience will understand why I was so excited to talk with you, Heather, because we're trying to make great connections, and it's exactly what you are doing in this particular area. And the way technology is being leveraged here is amazing. I would just add here, maybe just a shout for Switchboard, that Missio Nexus, which is an association of agencies in North America, has chosen to just brightly acknowledge Switchboard as an innovator. And so we say, way to go, Heather, to you and your team for helping so many do this. And when that association sees that and mentions it, you're on the right track.
Thank you so much.
So be encouraged, I guess. That's what I mean. Be encouraged. I know you're going to have lots of stories. I'd like to hear something that just delighted your heart when you realized that someone with a talent was able to exercise those talents into God's kingdom work. Not so much in the ministry side of things or the direct ministry side. We understand a lot of those things, but someone who's doing accounting or graphic design or something like that.
Absolutely. So first, we have a skill assessment, right? So we're using AI where in a sentence or two, you can tell us about yourself, right? Your personal and professional skills. So you might say something like, I'm Heather. I'm a graphic designer in Ontario for a school district. I'm a mom to 3 girls by adoption. I'm passionate about helping women and children who have been impacted by trafficking. I'm a natural born problem solver, organizer, and I love to sing on the worship team, right? And then a minute later, you'll actually get a tailored report sent to you and saying, Heather, here's what we learned about you. Here's how your unique skills, life experiences can be used to advance the gospel. And then we'll route you to open volunteer roles, right? Relating to those talents and regions and causes. So just for some examples so that you as a listener can actually visualize yourself, right? We've had a missionary from East Africa who was seeking expertise to launch an organic product on the international market, right? We connected to them to a CEO and founder in Indiana who was running this innovation-focused incubator. And they got on a weekly call and then they stayed in contact. And it saved this missionary so much time and helped them with strategy so that they were efficient from the beginning. So if you're a strategy person, this is for you. We had a BAM in the Czech Republic. They had revenue accounting questions. We're able to connect them with an accountant in Austin, help them on the macro level. So if you're an accountant or you're in the financial industry, a lot of requests for that. We had a leader actually in Montreal have some HR questions. We connected them to another HR executive. So again, setting up the organization from the beginning in an efficient way saves you so much time, right? You know that God has directed you to this, but there might be some of these things at the beginning you're not sure how to start that you as a listener, you might be the answer to that, right? We had a missionary in the Middle East who was trying to tell their story visually of what they had been doing. And we connected them to someone in Silicon Valley actually that worked in animation strategy for 20 years on some amazing films that was able to help them. This person had retired and they wanted to still be able to use their animation engineering experience, connected them with this missionary, and they were able to still give back in this creative area that they love. So you might be able to get connected to some really big wigs in their industries too, but it might even be niche like e-commerce too. So if you're the one limiting yourself thinking like, no, I am just a mechanic or just an engineer or I'm just a mom. That is not true. You are already doing so much for the Lord. And I promise you, the experiences that He has given you, He wants to use. And we really just want to help bring light to that. So I know we'll link to the show notes, the skill assessment, but I just encourage you to take that and just see some of the ways that your gifts could be used.
Sounds really good. Well, we're going to continue this conversation with Heather in just a moment. We're going to drill into a few more questions that I have about Switchboard and how it's working. Just before we do that, we'd like to show you this resource that we hope will be helpful to you and your church.
Hey everyone! Now that the school year is in full swing and church routines are settling in, we wanted to remind you of some resources on the Toolbox listed under Biblical Foundations. It's the very first category you'll see when you log into your account, and inside you'll find a collection of trustworthy courses. These could be a great fit for a fall Bible study at your church, a refresher for your missions committee to work through together, or even as a resource for small group leaders or a Sunday school class. We hope you'll take a look and consider what may serve your church best, and we're excited to see how God will work through your effort to build a strong foundation for missions in your church body. Thanks so much, and let's get back to today's conversation.
Well, welcome back. We are with Heather Trumpfheller, who is the Chief Growth Officer for Switchboard, which is a technology platform helping us advance the Great Commission around the world. Just to drill into some of the kind of practical questions, Heather, here, what would you say to someone who feels like their skill set isn't really a missionary skill set? It might even not, it doesn't even feel like it's a spiritual skill set. What do you say to folks like that?
First off, I feel you. That was so much of my story, right? You're already doing the work for the Lord, right? I think there's so many amazing resources out there and books and Garden City and, Work Isn't Secular, things like that. But I promise you at the end of the day, people just need connection because they need a sounding board. And that is really what the missionaries and the nonprofit leaders and the church planners, they need. So don't be in your head, right, that your skill set isn't spiritual enough. That is why Switchboard is really here, to relieve that pressure and remove that barrier. Because again, so many people assume the role that I can pray and I can tithe, and that's amazing. But I also promise that your skill set belongs in missions. So you're likely the one limiting yourself. That's why our skill assessment is here to be an easy way to link you to roles, to really just start opening that for you. Because again, most of these missionaries are the Jills and Jacks of all trades. So they just need someone to brainstorm with, and that could be you. We've had electricians help fix things in orphanages on the other side of the world via WhatsApp video. And so really get creative. Like God is not using, like He is using this in such big ways. We are the ones limiting it.
Oh, it's so good. And I really appreciate, thanks for pressing against the sacred secular divide. It just doesn't fit well. God has built us to serve, and this is just, I think it's just enhancing our ability to find the right places and make the connections. So it's beautiful. On the platform, are there skill sets that you often see asked for, commonly?
Absolutely. Marketing, social media, technology, and financial, I would say. And that's been a really beautiful way to unite geography and generations. So we've had quite a few Gen Z college students, right, help nonprofits get on TikTok on the other side of the world, or these nonprofits and these missionaries are building these polycentric teams, right? So someone in the mission field doesn't have to stay up to date on these tech trends. They can do what God called them to do, but it's uniting generations as well around these different skill sets. So a lot of marketing, a lot of social media and technology website, and then financial questions. And then we'll often get some really niche, like a specific UK law question. And again, God does big things on a platform. So that's why we encourage people, you might not have an immediate serving opportunity. And then one day this specific question will pop up on Switchboard and you're like, I know that. And it's amazing how you can learn, like sometimes these random things that fill our minds can be used down the road.
Well, I am curious to ask about fractional time. It's unlikely that through Switchboard, at least it seems from what you've described, that somebody's going to bring full-time effort. Maybe they do, but I'm wondering what kind of duration does a kingdom consultant need to bring to this to serve through Switchboard?
So there isn't a concrete answer of how much time you have to give, right? So right now we've got two main connection points. We've got a 1-hour consult and a virtual role. So the 1-hour consult is talking to an expert for an hour. And you can book that like day of or within a day around a particular topic. And then the virtual role is more of the flexible but ongoing type work, right? So this is filling a particular project or task. Higher commitment, but we also know you might not find that volunteer right away because that depends on the request, the availability of the volunteers with that capacity. So it is a range, but it is up to the volunteer. You're not going to be roped into a big commitment without your consent, right? So we're going to check in on the volunteer and check on the missionary to make sure things are going well. And you might be paired with a volunteer with the expectation, okay, we're going to do 2 hours a week or 1 hour a week. And you might start evolving. Maybe you're working on a website together and then you learn, okay, this isn't quite the skill set that I thought we were going to need. Then you pivot, right? So you're not locked into anything long term. Again, it's human to human. You're literally talking to a person as a sounding board. So we've often seen some connections meet once or twice and then resolve the problem that they thought was going to take a lot longer, but with the help of an expert can actually be resolved in an hour or two. And then some of these things are more frequent, reoccurring hours, right? A couple hours of a week. So again, we have someone who's retired or currently between roles, or a new stay-at-home parent whose kids just went off to school. And they have the bandwidth maybe to volunteer 10 hours a week. But I would say majority is an hour or so a week, right? They're doing this on their lunch break or their after hours where they're using their skills. Some people even have flexible jobs where they're able to incorporate this into their workday. So it really just depends. But we have things that range from a quick fix of a project to a 1-hour brainstorm call to a more reoccurring person that you essentially integrate into your team on a volunteerism capacity. But a couple people will have 4 or 5 different volunteers from Switchboard, each in their lane. Like Heather does my social media, Mags does my graphic designing, Maggie does my website development. And you have these different people. So you're building this team so that the volunteer hours are less for each individual volunteer. But it really just depends on the skill set. But we have seen people range from, 10 hours a week in a certain season, but most often it's 1 to 2 hours a week for a couple hours a month.
Well, that's helpful to know just how accessible this is. And I appreciate that you mentioned like lunch break or one evening a week or something like that. That's how accessible this makes a talent set into God's global work with just a great fluidity to it. So you answered a few of my questions. I was going to ask, is it usually a one-time thing or is it an ongoing relationship? It just depends then, right? It just evolves as is needed.
Yeah. We've seen 1-hour consults turn into virtual roles, right? A 1-hour turn into a weekly project. And I have a particular story that I really love. We had a missionary named Peter in Kenya, and he had this God-given vision, right? He wanted to build a self-sufficient Christian community that would serve as a center for sharing the gospel in Kenya. But he needed some specialized skills, right? So he came to Switchboard and we connected him to Bob, an architect. So it first started with this 1-hour call, right? Brainstorming. And then a couple weeks later, Bob reached out to us and said, what happened to Peter? I want to know, how did it go? And we said, you should ask him. So we reconnected them, right? And then they stayed in contact. Then they started talking monthly and they started doing video calls, right? And then they ended up, Peter came to America for something else. And he said, a couple states away, but I'm going to go meet Bob in person. And so Switchboard was actually able to be there while he pulled out the blueprints. And so this missionary and then this architect who had been virtually working together for a year, right? Started as a 1-hour call, turned into a weekly 1-year project because Bob joined the vision, right? Peter opened the door for Bob to join him on what God was doing. And Bob, who was an architect, was able to actually open his perspective and see the miracles that God was doing in another part of the world. And so we can't promise you that you're going to meet your volunteer in person, right? But it was beautiful. Virtual volunteering is really making this impact. And this partnership was more than just constructing a building, right? It was about creating a place where the gospel could thrive and people could encounter Christ. And God brought Peter and Bob together to fill his purpose. So yes, a 1-hour connection can actually turn into so much more.
Beautiful, absolutely beautiful example of how God uses that. Way to go. Thank you, Bob, and thank you to the many other Bobs who are out there on Switchboard and to the Peters. Amazing. I realize this is going to be helpful for the church planters, those that are at the front edge of gospel proclamation and so forth. I wonder whether it also works for other organizations. Like I'm part of a not-for-profit in Canada in my case, but we have particular skill sets that, boy, we just don't have that really bright on our team, as wonderful as this group is. Is this available to serve the offices or the structures of the not-for-profits as well?
Absolutely. We have so many on the platform, right? So for one example is Pioneers, right? Sending home office. They're on our...
Love Pioneers. Shout out to Pioneers.
Shout out to Pioneers. They have been with us from the beginning and they're on the platform, right? They have a lot of requests. They're finding volunteers through the platform. And then obviously Pioneers is pushing this out then to their missionaries and their goers. Then their goers are getting on the platform because they're seeing it first off come from the home office, right? So they're seeing the success. So then they're encouraging their goers to be on it. And then they're actually mobilizing out of their donors and their newsletters and the Pioneers community to adopt them onto the platform as kingdom consultants. So it's been a beautiful way actually for home offices to connect to their community through Switchboard. So absolutely, we would love for all of you to be on the platform.
Amazing. My peers, other leaders in Canada and across North America, some of them are listening to this. And just so you know, I've already got some ideas. Some of you may be engaged with Switchboard already, but I'm going to seek to encourage the conversation and facilitate. Let's see how the Lord could be blessing us through this ministry as well. I have a question here, Heather, but I already know the answer. I'm going to ask it anyway. How have the mission workers, how have the goers responded to the help that they've received?
Absolutely. The response has been amazing. So many people tell us, this is a weight off my shoulder. This was an answer to a prayer. The currency has shifted from dollars to testimonies, and there's been so much gratitude flowing, and that is contagious. So the mission workers are inviting this volunteer into seeing the miracles that God is doing. The outpour is tremendous. People are getting connected. They're finding out that God is doing so much, right? And it's contagious when you go back into your workday. And so many believers, right, who are stuck in this rut of their routine, like I wake up and I work and I do this, they're actually able to disrupt their day a little bit by going on a virtual missions trip, right? And then the dopamine hit that they get from serving is so much better, and they carry back that over into their workday. So they're actually being retained and they're having more purpose in their day jobs. And that's been a beautiful thing. But these missionaries, they were able to actually see, oh, wow, God provides, right? He just says my daily bread. He says, I'm going to give you the manna. And sometimes that's with a volunteer, and sometimes that's in a daily way. So it really has been amazing. The outpour has been awesome. And really the testimonies are really the beautiful thing apart about it.
Well, it is amazing, Heather, to hear how God is using this. I wonder just again, if you'd share with us an example where you realized this is what Switchboard is for. This is why the Lord brought this to pass.
Community is everything, right? I mean, the scripture says we were not made to do life alone, and love your neighbor is something that we are commanded, but technology has changed, right? It's expanded of what it means to love your neighbor in the best way. So a moment that I've loved on the platform is we had a church planner in Ukraine. And, they learned the language. They spent time preparing. They physically went. They got there. They ended up having a child who was diagnosed with autism. Sorry, hold on. Let me say that one more time. Okay, I'm going to start all the way back over. Sorry, Maggie. Okay. Community is everything. And the definition of love your neighbor has expanded because of technology in the best way. And a moment early on in the platform that I really loved is we had a church planter. They moved to Ukraine and they spent all this time preparing, learning the language, gathering the things, raising support, having the prayer partners. They get there and their child was diagnosed with autism, and they immediately became really overwhelmed. They felt like they needed to abandon everything that God had called them to do, right? They felt like they needed to leave Ukraine. And we connected them to a parent here in Texas, actually, who had been raising a child with autism. And this 1-hour call gave them confidence and encouragement right off the bat. And then they asked them, they said, hey, can we keep more in touch frequently? And this empowered the missionary to stay in Ukraine because they had a support system in Texas to ask the little questions, the big questions, someone praying for them, someone who was proactively offering advice. So they were able to stay engaged in their church plant, reach so many people for Jesus, able to be a parent in this different season that they were expecting, and have this really beautiful connection. Love your neighbor changed, right? And it came to people in different parts of the world over a shared experience that God brought both of them to. So it might be something you personally have gone through and you don't quite see yet why God brought you through that, right? But there will be fruit from it. So many of our hardest seasons become our biggest testimonies because community is everything. And we weren't made to do this alone. So really leaning into that has been a beautiful thing where it's like, this is working.
Well, this has been amazing to hear some of the stories about how God is using it. I'm optimistic that many from our audience are going to want to learn more. What's the best way they can do that, Heather?
Check out our website at globalswitchboard.io. There you will find physical resources, videos, content, testimonials, more about us, right? A demo of the platform. So globalswitchboard.io. There you can also take our skill assessment, right? Start opening your eyes to see how God wants to use you. If you're a missionary, check out the Ministry Expansion Kit. That's a great way to do a skills gap analysis and learn how virtual volunteerism can actually change your team and change your mission. If you're a part of a church or you know your church leadership, we have a virtual missions kit. This is a way that your whole congregation can adopt Switchboard and really take their mission strategy to a different level. But for me, I didn't invite God into every area of my life, right? And so we talked a little bit about how the pandemic changed for Switchboard. The pandemic also changed for me. That is when my whole life became blurred together, right? In lockdown. Before, I'd been really compartmentalizing God. But when you start inviting Jesus into everything, your energy, your money, your gifts, your skills, your time, you can start treating everything like ministry. So hopefully Switchboard is really that platform for you as well.
I think it's going to be very helpful, and I'm looking forward to learning more about it myself. Again, if you are in ministry and you're helping to reach an unreached people group, for example, church planting, you can do the Ministry Expansion Kit. If you are a person with talent and curiosity about how your gifts can be used, you can do the skill assessment. There will be links to all of this in the show notes that you can find readily there. Heather, I love the heart of this, and I love the blend. To my friends who are regular listeners, you can hear the blend. Yes, there's technology hard at work here, really working on our behalf. But undergirding that is a heart for the Lord's work and for honoring him with whatever he's entrusted to us. This is about stewardship and making great connections for the body to fulfill the purposes of God in global missions. And it's really, really good, Heather. I would like to close with a familiar question to our audience. Heather, if you could imagine being in a room in person with a group of people from the sending churches. These may be comprised of missions committees, pastors, other leaders, and people just generally who really want to do a good job of global missions. And you can speak to them. What would you like to say to that group?
There's no hierarchy when it comes to missions, right? Everyone can do something. And if you're a perfectionist or you're thinking my impact's not big enough, again, you're the one limiting yourself. There is no hierarchy. There's no elite skills. There's no elite Christians, right? And I really think that's what it is we can't reimagine what it looks like. We fit missions in this tiny box. We fit and outsource it again to the churches, to the goers, to the ministry leaders. But I also want to challenge the goers and the ministry leaders that just because you're going doesn't mean you can't take help from virtual too, right? You can't flip on and off missions when you go on a plane or when you raise support or you quit your job, right? It's little things too. And so I think in the same way that technology has had us rethink, right? I mean, 10 years ago, if you told someone, hey, I'm going to land at this airport and get into a car with a stranger, check their license plate, and then they're going to take me to my hotel, you would be like, what? And now you're like, that's called Uber. And we all do it. And technology is often disrupting how we think. And so I just challenge you, if you're thinking a virtual platform is not missions, well, maybe you're limiting on the perspectives you can get from different people and generations and building this polycentric missions team quicker and easier, right? We are the one limiting it. So I really just challenge you, if you're a volunteer, do something, right? Everyone can volunteer. Everyone can have a heart for mission. Don't outsource it. You're the one depriving yourself. Take that ownership of the Great Commission. And if you're the one limiting that, virtual volunteerism doesn't play a role in my mission story, I promise you, you're behind the game, right? Jump into technology, lean into it. So I really think it's a beautiful thing of just uniting people there.
Well, amazing. Heather, thank you for spending this time with us today. And a big thanks to you and your team for continuing to bring your heart for the Lord and blending it with technology and helping to open new doors of possibility. We really appreciate you being on the Global Missions Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us today. We hope that this episode stirred some new ideas about how your talents and skills might be brought into global missions. There is a place in this story for you. We love hearing from you, our audience, so if you have an idea for an episode or for a resource in the toolbox that would be helpful to you and your church, please reach out to us. You can do that on the website. You can also find us on Instagram and on YouTube. Come and subscribe, and you won't miss any of the episodes along the way. This podcast is produced by the Global Missions Toolbox, and we invite you to stop by the website and see the resources there, globalmissionstoolbox.com, and in the upper right is the tab for the podcast. That'll lead you to all the previous episodes and the search engine in case you want to keep learning in this way. We invite you to join us again in 2 weeks when we'll publish a new episode exploring this grand adventure of being Christ's witnesses to the ends of the earth.